about America and democracy. There is no America. There is no democracy. We no longer live in a world of nations and ideologies. The world is a college of corporations, inexorably determined by the immutable bylaws of business. The world is a business. And I have chosen you to preach this evangel.
For all my free market healthcare robbing, stock stealing, retirement fund fucking with niggas. Fuck you little credit card scamming, jewelry stealing, crack selling, liquor store robbing motherfuckers. Shout to the homies, Carnegie, OG, Willie Randolph Hearst, Baruch, Rockefeller, the real Rockefeller, my main bitch Leona, pour out a little Louis XIII, Scott Rothstein, Jack Abramoff, hold your head, my road shop niggas, let's get this money. I spend my day prepping America overseas, pension for the workers, nigga please, embezzlement, etiquette, private settlement, I'm better with Confederate rhetoric from my mansion in Connecticut, foreclosure Vic holes out the tenement, I twist words like a speech impediment, I hope you got good credit bitch, if not better get a new job with benefits, while I play golf with niggas and get cheddar with, new money buys brand new carrots, my old money bunch of great grandparents, you got grills in your mouth, I ain't mad at ya, I own every gold mine in South Africa. Thanks, baby, you made me $1 billion. Plus, I own a building for each one of my children's children.
Welcome to UCY.TV. We are live. It's your host, The Life of Hugo Chavez, Part 2. Welcome, Chris.
Everybody, we are live. Welcome to UCY Radio once again, Voice of Rebellion Radio. It is 9 Eastern time, and feels like this. If it feels like this 9 Eastern time got here a little bit closer than usual, that is because it did. We did spring forward last night 1 hour, so now I guess we start to finally get these longer days, and it seems like we go back to that time where my show is not that long after dark and doesn't feel like it's the middle of the night. When I'm doing my show, soon it'll feel like the evening's just starting, instead of the show that seems to be way into the night. But anyways, Voice of Rebellion Radio show today. We were doing a part 2 to last week's show, The Life of Hugo Chavez. I felt that the last show was kind of cut short. I mean, it didn't feel like I had enough time to get everything I wanted to be set out. And plus, down in Venezuela, they decided to do 10 days of honoring Chavez, and it's still in the 10 days afterwards. It does it until Tuesday, actually. And there's a few things that happened this week, and first thing I want to address is that there was the right-wing opposition in Venezuela was calling for protest on the street, and which sounded like it, because last time there was protest on the street from the right wing, there were violent riots. This is more like what was going on. It was very uneventful, and actually what happened is it got trolled pretty much because the Chavistas showed up to the streets in way bigger numbers, and that just shows right there that the truth about the opposition in Venezuela is that these super rich people, they can't really convince that many people to actually go out the streets. They might be able to convince them to vote, but they won't actually convince them to be that active and go on the streets, because they're the people that they do have in their party, which is exaggerated how many people are in their party, but the people in their party just have no passion. They have no fervor whatsoever, and they are like the Marco Rubio supporters of here in the United States or whatever. I think the most blandest, political. I think they have more. They're more intense than these, right wingers in Venezuela. Except the ones that are very intense. These are different. These are terrorists. These aren't just regular political supporters. The ones that were rioting, burning shit in Caracas and shooting their own people, blaming it on the Venezuelan government. That's a whole different league of people. These aren't political activists by any means whatsoever. These people are just plain out terrorists funded by the United States and funded by Israel, probably. Assad's all in the Caribbean. They have Chavez told the Venezuelan people before that Assad targets Venezuela, and the Venezuelan opposition never talks about Israel because they ultimately get their money from Israel, or at least some of their money from Israel, another part probably from the United States. It's a completely funded movement. It's funny that people won't think, especially now, next few months in America on a global scale politically, because of these big distractions at the elections of the United States are going on, these presidential elections. You have loudmouth Trump up there, who it's crazy how long this thing has went on in the United States, and one of the craziest things about it is that all the media attention that the whole thing has been. It's been a media circus. The mainstream media has used that to distract people from so many issues since he announced his run in June 2015, and now we have this big thing that apparently his protest got shut down in Chicago or whatever. The fake alternative media is just going on all fours right now, saying that, oh man, look, Trump's freedom of speech has been infringed on. Oh my God, these thugs in Chicago did this. And here's what I have to say to them: is that most of the thugs in Chicago, or the protesters in Chicago, I don't really care either side for, because a lot of those people are just going to vote for Hillary, and then the other people, and then the Trump supporters. Trump talking about freedom of speech is absolutely absurd, considering the guy wants to shut off the internet in an effort to, or he's going to say he's going to consider shutting down parts of the internet to stop terrorism. And number two, that's all the things that he said is that is that he believes that a whole religion, talk about freedom of religion there, is a threat to the United States, is what he said, which is not, I think it's people that all this rhetoric that Trump is bringing out is new. It's just that they didn't used to say this stuff to the public. They might sit behind closed-door meetings, behind the APAC meetings, at these other different high political think tank meetings, but they didn't used to say it out to the public. Now the fascism is becoming much more open, it looks like, as we go into this 2016 election than it used to be. It was the NSA scandal and all that stuff. I think that's what makes these prospective elite selected politicians, presidents, to feel that they can bring out this open fascist rhetoric and they won't have much of a problem, because when the NSA scandal happened, it was a direct violation to America, to the Fourth Amendment, and it ultimately was, these people that used to, for a long time before would have spoke out about it, the American people, now had nothing to say about it. In fact, came out in support of it. So when I saw that NSA scandal go that way, I was like, the U.S. government as a whole has no problem no longer revealing these absolutely horrid human rights abuses. In Chicago, it's funny that, I wonder how many people were actually out there protesting, the Guantanamo Bay that they practically have in Chicago. They had a black site that the United States government was running and torturing people, just regular criminals, I think, like people that were suspected of crime and doing these, cruel and unusual punishments to them, like they were at Guantanamo Bay. And so that's where both sides of that, I just watched the whole media spectacle, and I'm just clueless, to how so many people are so invested in this game. And, ultimately, I believe that my prediction is that Trump won't win the election, that the elite are not selecting it that way. It's going to go to Hillary in the long run. And I'm pretty sure that what's going to ultimately happen is that I don't even think Trump's going to win the nomination. They'll give it to Rubio probably or something. I think I'm sticking pretty firm with my prediction at the beginning. As I said, Rubio versus Clinton. Clinton wins, becomes the elite selected politician to bring martial law, to bring World War III, with the United States officially bombing Syria and Iran. And, I was thinking about down there and all these things that have been distracting from all these events that are now going on in South America. We have what has happened today has been actually a very big day in Latin American history, because today could have been the day that the whole Chavista revolution could have came to an end all abruptly. And this could have been the day that the third coup attempt happened, and this third coup attempt overthrew Maduro and brought in some oligarch like Pedro Carmona, or probably Capriles Radonsky would probably assume the presidency and declare a dictatorship officially. This could have been that day. But the Democratic, the people's support for the Chavista revolution, they all came out to the streets in huge numbers. Thousands of people out onto the streets of Caracas, tens of thousands of people out on the streets of Caracas, and said, "Ya basta," at the terrible imperialism that's been going on from the United States for the last or the United States has been doing to South America for really ever since the end of the Cold War, is extreme imperialism. And then it came to an end, and the people of South America went against it in the last 20 years. But they said that we are not going to let it happen again, and we are continuing a revolution down here. And that's what those people on the streets of Venezuela did. And the United States has done many tactics, and it's being blamed on the Venezuelan government, some of the problems of Venezuela. And it's the same people that say they're awake, same people that say they know about the New World Order. It's the same people that criticize the United States government, but they don't believe that the United States government is in a conspiracy to overthrow a government that has posed the Rothschilds and has posed them for a long time. They don't believe that. They believe it's all to the Venezuelan government's fault, which is absurd. Explain to you one thing, is that the fact that the food shortages that happen in that country. You know what they're doing is that the United States and all these other Western countries are trying to starve them out. And there hasn't been these terrible food shortages that people report. They show these couple bad examples. You know, it's like when after a tornado happens somewhere and they go down the streets or whatever and they take the picture, you know, when they really want to play up the drama and special on TV and take pictures of the worst torn apart parts of town. But there's also, that's one neighborhood, and the rest of the city might be just mild damage here and there or whatever. You know, what's happened in Venezuela? Yes, there's food shortages. You go to one grocery store, maybe there isn't a lot of food on the shelves. But I'll tell you one thing, is that in the United States, we've had problems like that before. You know, maybe not with food, but we've had to remember the fuel shortages and stuff like that. We've had shortages of supplies. And, you know, to say that this is so unusual. And the reason that this is happening is because they have these embargoes or whatever and sanctions placed on them, that now nobody can really trade. And some of the people, the only people that trade are so far away. I mean, it's a country like Russia that can still trade. But look at that, as one of the furthest treks possible of shipping. You have Cuba. They can only provide so much because they're a small country themselves. Venezuela can provide so much from inside, but the thing is that they never have been able to completely reform their economy. It's actually good that it happened at this stage, because if this happened in 2001, 2002, you know, they would have had a massive problem, because at that time, yeah, the Venezuelan government was not, our Venezuelan economy wasn't as self-sufficient as it is now. Now it's a bit more self-sufficient, that could have, you know, they definitely could have been starved out, I think, earlier in the revolution. However, they went straight to the simple, violent tactic instead, believing that'd be easier, believing they could do it in a very quickly, instead of putting all the time into doing that. And then they did the attempt, but they didn't realize the Venezuelan military was prepared, the ones that were still loyal to Chavez, and Chavez stayed in power. So now with this tactic, I don't think they realize that they're not going to fall for that bullshit. There's going to be some people that will actually think that the Venezuelan government is responsible for the food shortage, but they know where that's ultimately coming from. And what will happen if they had if you want to see a lack of food, you should have seen what happened during the 89, during the Carazaco, or what led up to the Carazaco, during the Anti-Perez fascist dictatorship, is that at that time, the prices were so high, no one could afford it. It was... And so it was ultimately saying people couldn't feed themselves. And then when the people went out to start, you know, eventually they had no other option. The protests started. They started looting just to survive. And then they just started killing a bunch of the protesters. So it's the same people that are supposedly awake, supposedly know what's going on, but they'll support at the same time. So they'll support the return, is what it seems like, of a government that's supposedly free market, in quotations. That's the opposite of free market will be coming up, which will be just some corporate crony government. And the funny thing is that these people, they have two, let me actually finish what I was saying, but the one, it's like Perez, a fascist dictatorship, that, yeah, he'll be all good with the corporations, of that these blood-sucking, money-grabbing corporations, but they'll be killing their own people. Let's go back to what happened or what I've seen happening over the last few years. That they'll say, you know, stuff like, oh, the American government's so corrupt, it's horrible, it's a massive giant entity, but that's preventing the free market. Oh, but a good thing we do have a generally relative, talk about how horrible the situation is here with the market or whatever. Well, then they'll say that at the same time, be glad that we have pretty much a free market in this country. You're not in Venezuela under socialism or whatever. And they don't know much about what Venezuela is. And at the same time, it's funny. They can't be both ways. You can't say that the United States government's so far from a free market, and that if we were on a free market, it'd be great. Or at the same time, say that it's already great and we already have a free market. It's like, what? You're saying two different realities here, and ultimately, it's a major contradiction of what you're trying to, what you're saying. You're saying, ultimately, the truth is that the United States government, it's true, is not a free market, and it's not great. We have 50% of this country is in poverty. 80% of this country is one paycheck away from going homeless. We have people, the number of people that live for $2 a day has quadrupled in the last 20 years. We have, at this point in America, 400 people, which are all NWO insiders, it looks like, control 80% of America's wealth, while the rest of us, 699,600 people fight for the last 20%. Of course, this country is not in good shape, and Venezuela, Venezuela, for one thing, it's not really it's comparable. It's not comparable. I mean, what they came from, at the beginning of all this revolution, it was a horrible situation, and it was one of the poorer countries in the world, where people were living in slums, people could not get food. You had so many people illiterate. You had subpar health care for the poor. And ultimately, the Rothschilds ran the show there. Rothschilds ran the Central Bank of Venezuela, and they wouldn't be kicked out till 2006. So what I have to reiterate about that is that it seems like there's a lot of people spreading a lot of disinfo about Venezuela, and they'll just say, oh yeah, the mainstream media all they spit out is a bunch of propaganda or whatever. Then they spit out propaganda about Venezuela from the mainstream media. What? I mean, it's just so baffling, and ultimately, I think it's they'll talk about the dogmatic ideologies of Leninists or whatever. On that other flip side of and a lot of those people are very dogmatic, but they will be very dogmatic, on a few principles and don't actually take pragmatism, which they preach a lot, but they don't practice it in their rhetoric and their analysis of everything that's going on. And a lot of these people like Milton Friedman, that was he was that economist that now has been I think closely connected with the University of Chicago. He was a big supporter of the Pinochet fascist regime because he was privatizing all these social programs, every last social program, and ultimately the poor had no access to the stuff that they used to own. And now it was all ran by a few corporations, and these few corporations were in bed with the Pinochet government, and were getting richer and richer, while they ended up, the poorest Chileans, the ones that actually dissented, got killed, disappeared in vans. All the activists got put into the black vans, disappeared, and their remains might be found 20 years later. It was absolutely an awful situation in Chile, and I think that now, as they've been tested, the revolution down south in South America, I think now they are finally starting to realize that they can't go back to that. And I think I think that ultimately, well, at least in Venezuela, they're not going to follow an example of Argentina or whatever that ended up fallen back into that and voted for Macri, this super pro-British, this pro-Israeli traitor, so that he's been to the Argentine people. Just a few months into his presidency, he's been an absolute disaster. And it appears the Argentines already want him gone. They're going to be stuck with him a little while unless they go into do some kind of revolution. I think that what happened with Chavez is somewhat of a. There was only two options really. There was the nonviolent way and there was the violent way, I guess, of letting the people take the power in Venezuela, because they had Chavez. They did everything they could during the election to try to downplay Chavez's chances. They said in the media they had no chance. Had 8% vote. Only 8% of Venezuela will vote for him. They're trying to say that ultimately that it was hopeless to vote for him, but ultimately he had like 70% of the support. I think ultimately the oligarchs growing nervous may just handed them in that election, and it was like what the people around the Chavista circle said. In the PSUV, they said, "Well, how about you guys should do run Chavez?" Because he didn't even want to run. He said it was rigged. There wasn't really a point for him to run. And then at the end, he decided to run because he was told that he could win so overwhelmingly they'll just have to hand him the election. And that's what pretty much happened. Nobody wanted any more of that fake democracy, what was really a dictatorship that had been going on since even since for a long time. Because there was actually an open military dictatorship till '59, and then '59 afterwards, it was these phony democratic presidents, is what they said. And then Andres Perez, who by most people look back at him will say that he was a dictator. And from the 70s, the 80s, and 90s, it was dominated by his presence. And all the way up to, and all these, Caldera and the guy who was in the charge of Venezuela in the 80s, mid-80s or whatever, they were just kind of living in the shadow of him and ultimately just following his policies. After so many years of Andres Perez's legacy controlling Venezuela, people just grew sick and tired of it. It was after the Carazaco mainly was one of the biggest events. Now we just passed the 27th anniversary of the Carazaco. It was February 27th, 1989, when some estimates say that those protesters are being killed by the Andres Perez government. It was possibly 3,000 of them were killed by the Andres Perez. And then a few years later, Hugo Chavez and a few people in the military decided to try to attempt a coup to overthrow the very, at that point, was now seen as an open tyrant, Andres Perez, and they failed and they were put in jail. But then the Andres Perez charges had to be pretty much that they put the coup plotters had to be pretty much reversed when somebody that actually had ran against Andres Perez way back in the 70s, and he was a longtime activist, brought such a convincing claim to the Supreme Court of Venezuela that they had to accept it, and they decided to indict Andres Perez on corruption, and they put him in jail shortly. Chavez was let go out of jail in '94. Caldera took the place to try to continue the Andres Perez legacy. However, Andres Perez's legacy would come to an end, as in '97, the Fifth Republic movement came about. Chavez decides to run for the president in '98, and then on December 6, 1998, Chavez won the election and overwhelmingly defeated Romer from Copa, which was pretty much to continue what has been the political status quo for the last 40 years. Political status of corruption and ultimately just being at the remote control from the United States towards Caracas. But that ended then, and Chavez at first, I think he came off kind of moderate. He wasn't as nearly as didn't nearly have the fervor against the economic policies of the United States, but I think that even his fervor towards Israel, against Israel, and also against Western Europe. Developed a little bit later, possibly. At least they didn't show it at first. But then around 01, 02, especially after the coup. The coup happened. That was which the United States and Spain allegedly had planned the coup against Chavez. After that, then the whole course of the movement got a lot more radical. And I think this is what this test that was put upon them today might have just increased the passion of the Chavistas in Venezuela. That's what they don't realize, is that every time they test them like this, they just get stronger. And they've had a few tests over the years. I mean, think about it. They had the coup in 2002. They had, with Chavez's cancer, actually, I think brought a lot more movement, a lot more power. And then in 2011, in 2013, after his death, of course, the inspiration of the revolution continued, got stronger, and then with the attempted coup, the protests, the riots, and eventually the attempted coup in early 2015 was another test. And then after their second attempt coup failed, the funny thing is that Obama decided, well, okay, so we couldn't actually, we're going to make it impossible. We're going to try to starve you guys out since the two coup attempts didn't work. And they ultimately decided to put the first decree of sanctions that have been just renewed again, literally just a few days ago. And then each time it's brought more passion to the Chavistas. And now the newest test that happened today was the right wing pretty much calling for, they were calling for the long term. What they were saying is for the removal of Maduro. And today was going to be pretty much the start of the push to make him resign. But ultimately, it just got completely shirt-fronted by these guys, by the Chavistas. There were so much more of them on the streets than there were of these, U.S. lackeys, probably some rich kids or whatever, that they could actually get on the streets, or maybe people they were just, able to pay enough, because almost nobody showed up on the streets. And that's the thing about these protests that happen, is that, they could bring in the Chavistas will bring in 10 times more than what these, the opposition can bring in. And then the only tactic they have, because they don't have the numbers, it looks like, even though the election showed something different, but since they don't have the numbers on the street, at least, they have to go to try to beat them on the street. They have to go to extreme acts of violence, such as shootings, such as riots, and arson, stuff like that, in order to officially these few people doing these acts they're putting terror into the mindsets of the Venezuelan people and trying to sway their minds out by force. And that's ultimately the very definition of terrorism they're doing. This is and that's your only tactic they have. They don't have any by logic, by even charismatic leadership, because their leadership is not charismatic. You see a loop, you see Capriles Radonsky, and also another thing that there's the obvious foreign feeling, especially with Capriles Radonsky, that he's not really Venezuelan. He's not looking out for the Venezuelan people. And Capriles Radonsky, look at his fucking last name. That's how close he's way more connected to Europe than it is to Venezuela. Obviously, Polish. He's actually partially Jewish. Not saying that much to do anything with anything, but he seems to be very what reeks from Capriles Radonsky is of a Jewish Zionist, which I know he's pro-Israel, and the whole movement of the opposition has been funded by Israel, that's because it's been one of the biggest plans. Because ultimately, Venezuela has opposed Israel for a long time, and Israel, they don't like oil reserves that they can't tap into ever. And Venezuela, they can't. Venezuela has more oil than Saudi Arabia. And that's right now what's starting to happen. And I think the West is so frustrated because everything that they try, every little plot that they try, it fucking backfires on them. And I will say, See, I would be not so diplomatic about, that's the problem maybe with me being in any position of spokesperson or whatever. Like, if I was a spokesperson of Bolivarian oil reserves or whatever, and they asked me to not comment on what I think about all these plots that are going on to try to engage in an oil war, to try to run Venezuela bankrupt by Saudi Arabia selling at a price that no one can refuse because it's so low, way under production value. But ultimately, they don't have enough oil to actually make Venezuela go bankrupt. And that's what's happened. They're going to run out of oil first. And then what I would ultimately just say is, like, what the fuck, you son? Start going into, start putting on the Italian character or whatever, to start being like the Andrew Dice Clay, just put a throw in a nursery rhyme like you used to do, a dirty nursery rhymes. So, that's the problem, is that I ultimately have a little bit of a loudmouth characteristic. I'm not, ultimately, though, Chavez, that was part of his charisma. They wasn't afraid to call, shitheads. He didn't, Putin, he didn't like he was like very different from Putin, because Putin, he would say it in such a way, instead of, Chavez would call him, the United States, the leaders of the United States, shitheads. Well, pretty much, like one time he called them shit Yankees, the people that were attempted sabotage from inside his country. But ultimately, he would have all kinds of names. Or one time Maduro, Maduro called somebody, we'll call it Caprice Verdanski, ultimately, I called him a faggot. And that's not really cool, but but you know what, when it comes to Caprice Verdanski himself, it wasn't, I don't think that Maduro was targeted because of anything like that, of any alleged homosexuality of Caprice Verdanski. I think that he was saying it because of just his very annoying personality and all this he's done, like saying loser or, you low life or whatever, which is wrong to use that word for that and substitute like that, but ultimately I don't think he meant it that way. Even though that there's these rumors about Caprice Verdanski, I think that's what drew the attention of people, because Caprice Verdanski, there's rumors concerning he's never been married or whatever, and he's like 40-something years old. Which I don't find, I don't know if that can mean two different things. It can mean really three different things, actually. Now that I think of it, it could either A, just be a real womanizer and never settle down with a woman. That's possible. There's B, is that he's that he can't find a woman who actually want to marry him, or C, that he's actually in the closet and he's gay. But I think that I don't think that Maduro meant it that way. But Chavez, he also called, he said, "Damn you, state of Israel," or whatever. But Putin, when talking about, Chavez had all the names for the United States or whatever. Putin, when he talks about the United States, he probably says something like, "I am heavily concerned and perplexed by the situation in D.C. I would like to check with this, while I would advise caution in the situation." He's so much more formal and diplomatic. And I think that's ultimately, I think it's been one of his strengths, actually, is this diplomacy, because his diplomacy actually stopped what could have been an invasion of Syria by the United States in 2013. What he pretty much just said is that, how about I just tell Syria to give up their chemical weapons? Then your little phony excuse no longer works. And ultimately, the United States had no option but to just let the Putin's plan work out. They tried, they tried a few things. Ultimately, though, they used the ISIS boogeyman in Syria to go into Syria. While their plan was never to fight ISIS, their plan was actually to fight the Syrian government and help ISIS take over Syria. But guess what? Ultimately, the Syrian government didn't fold in that easily. ISIS wasn't actually that big of, United States government trained Islamic terrorists didn't end up being that big of a deal for the Syrian Arab army. If anyone wants to call in, please do. Just call in at 718-717-8296, 717-8296. Here at Voice of Rebellion Radio. We're about a quarter into the show. I wish we had some sound clips I could put on the show or whatever. That would come pretty handy for the show, just because of the fact that the cool stuff I can play, especially if there's a Spanish show. I think, the English show, there's not a lot of Chavez's sound clips that were in English, so I guess it wouldn't exactly work out. No, definitely there's been a lot of, English-speaking activists and stuff around the world that would support Chavez. I mean, there was, George Galloway in Britain, or there's really none in the United States, ultimately. High-level people, I'm talking, I was thinking of politicians, actually, because, of course, all the politicians in the United States are bought and controlled by big banks. But, I mean, there's few activists. There's a few, people like in the movies or whatever, like Sean Penn. Sean Penn he actually went down to Venezuela. He actually met Chavez, and Sean Penn was, it's funny because he didn't actually speak any Spanish. It's like, I think it was a bit odd, ultimately, because he seemed like a little bit lost in such a different place than what he's used to. His environment in Hollywood, but it's commendable in the political contributions that Sean Penn's given over the years, because I'm pretty sure that Sean Penn, unlike some of these, so-called left celebrities or whatever that still support Barack Obama or whatever, I'm pretty sure he renounced the support of Barack Obama pretty early after he realized who he was. And his thing is that I don't really, I see people, I see that unfortunately a lot of people fell for the entire Obama thing. They thought he could bring this great change back in 2008 while he was speaking all the rhetoric and saying these things, and ultimately he just ended up becoming another establishment president. But, a lot of people fell for it. Gaddafi was one of the first ones to call him out. He actually said, saying that this guy is ultimately, how you described it, well, because he is black, will try to act right and right to please this establishment, is how he described it. Of course, Gaddafi was very strong, Pan-Africanist. I think that ultimately what he's trying to say is that the establishment, he's going to try to be more establishment than even the establishment, because he was deemed as somebody that was outside the establishment. Well, ultimately, he just fit right into their establishment plans, and Obama just continued, did what they wanted him to do. He got us into Syria and set the stage for a much larger invasion. And it's not to say that it won't happen under his presidency. And it's already a pretty large military operation that went underway inside of Syria. He set the stage for a possible invasion of Iran. And now this is one of the most ridiculous things I've seen. I saw this week is that apparently they are now talking about that there might be that they're going to try to make Iran pay up some ridiculous amount of money for the pay for their part. They said that they were somehow responsible in 9/11. They said that these people were supported Al-Qaeda, which is the most hilarious thing ever, because you see what they've done in Syria. They've been one of the main fighters of Al-Qaeda and ISIS. And they say that Iran has involvement in 9/11 or whatever, and that they're going to make Iran pay for it, which is, I guess, it's just detracting from who was really starting to get the blame. A country that actually did have a role in 9/11, Saudi Arabia, and that's kind of been quieted down, hasn't it? And then what has still never been brought up is, of course, not in the United States political scene, the United States' role in 9/11, the United States government's role in 9/11, and the Israeli role in 9/11. The dancing Israelis, the 16 Israelis that were arrested on the day of 9/11. And then, of course, you talk about the United States, that they'll call you anti-Semitic, they'll call you racist or whatever. And you just got to detract from that, because, this is paid troll arguments. I like this little meme I saw, when somebody has such a bad argument, when they say that if you think that Israel had a role in 9/11, you are a racist and whatever, and you're a hateful person, or that if talk about that if you oppose Obama, you're racist or whatever. These arguments, these really ad hominem, baseless arguments is this little meme I saw is like anarchy cat can eat a can of apple alphabet soup and shit out a better argument than that. I don't know. I pick up, ultimately anarchy cat. I'm pretty sure that page or whatever that was putting that stuff. They ultimately put up these kind of stuff like I was people about is that these, it's like, oh, America is in a bad shape because we don't have a free market. It's actually in a good shape because we do have a free market. These contradictory things or whatever. But a few things. I mean, of course, I think that's one of the major problems inside the movement is we have this great division, between so many different movements. And there's, of course, some very extremists in there that should be a part of it. And they really are not against the things they say they are. Like, for example, the people that are on the, people like I think that also they're following a lot of times shill, like people that are saying stuff that comes right out of David Duke's mouth or whatever. And ultimately, David Duke is most likely a shill, a racist that's probably trying to divide us up. Because what does he do? He tells, you tell people hate black people ultimately, and but he claims not to. He claims not to be. He actually will accept black people into the KKK or whatever. Still start bringing up these unrelated stuff between each other. Say that look, this crack dealer was let out early, so it means that the United States government's linked to all black crack dealers or whatever. It's just weird stories I see coming out of that section of the internet, and I think David Duke, Alex Jones. Mark Dice is looking real suspicious now. I mean, Mark Dice I tried to get him on the show one time, and he said he didn't have time for it or whatever. I'm just like, he probably doesn't want to come on the shows that he doesn't know anything about because he knows that there's a chance that he'll be trolled a lot or whatever, and that he'll be, people will expose him possibly outright if he is like that. And I see these pieces of information in there that says, Mark Dice. Well, of course, that Mark Dice is a changed name. That's Mark Schuldice, and he got his money. He's actually a pretty rich guy, actually, and he's not just, some regular Joe, almost like he claims to be a pretty rich guy that before was like a wingman service or whatever. He would sell himself for a few hours to hang out with some dude or whatever that was trying to pick up some chick or whatever, and then he would be the wingman. What a wingman is, of course, talking up the guy. He's not as bad as, for example, Alex Jones that has such a big following. Alex Jones has practically became mainstream, and his rhetoric has became very reminiscent of Fox newscast, news host or whatever. I don't even see him talk about 9/11 and stuff like that anymore, really. And I don't hear him mention the word Bilderberg too much and stuff like that. What I've seen a lot out of his pages is Trump supporting. More and more that Trump is going to save us from all this stuff is what he keeps saying. And Trump is the answer to saving America from, now it's no longer he no longer talks about the elites, the true people that are behind the players of the Rothschilds. They're ultimately behind the problems of the United States. Now he's going to blame like Muslims and Mexicans. Just ultimately he's falling for the rhetoric that divides us. And he's always, it seems like, I don't know if there was ever a time when he ever talked good about Hugo Chavez. He's always done that, used mainstream propaganda against Hugo Chavez and put these completely false articles to make him look bad. Who never talks about it? He never talks about the Israelis. Never talks about the Zionists because he ultimately he looks to be pretty pro-Israel. I think that is without saying, doesn't need to be said anymore. Alex Jones belongs to that side. Hugo Chavez, talked bad about by the mainstream media, by Alex Jones or whatever. I think ultimately, for us people that are more aware of the situation in South America, is that where's all the criticism of the predecessor to Hugo Chavez? Where's Andres Perez brought into the conversation? He was the real tyrant. He was one that there was real food shortages under. And this talk about the food shortages has led to this. I saw, again, like I said, this natural news is just a. I thought that they were a good website. I thought they were a website promoting stuff like, staying away from GMOs and eating natural food. But ultimately, I saw like, oh yeah, there's a food police state in Venezuela. Everybody freak out. It's no. Here's what I gotta say about that: is that they have, I think they even tried to claim stuff was false, that they are like, putting in biological insert chips in order to track people or whatever. There, no. Okay, now you have to get a special ID. Okay, and then you go into the store and you show them that you're actually a Venezuelan citizen. And then and then you can actually purchase the food at the subsidized prices. Because what was happening is, because in a country that's having a worse situation, a really bad situation, and nobody's also talked about that, is a Colombian situation with terrible inflation. They have the community leaders are getting killed in Colombia. It's an absolutely bad situation. And nobody's talking about that. And that's why there's a lot of people desperate. They're running over to Venezuela, and I'm desperate. It's people taking advantage of the desperate people in Colombia. They cross the border, these Colombians, and then they go buy up a ton of shit, load up a truck of stuff, and then they run back to the other side to Colombia and sell stuff at 10 times the value, because the prices are so much higher in Colombia. I mean, the minimum wage in Colombia is $120 a month. And the prices still are pretty high up for being, for the wages being that low. Those people ultimately live, a lot of times, there's a lot of servitude in Colombia. I mean, people are not even that rich, have servants, they have maids or whatever, stuff like that. And then a lot of times they live with the owner, and they do stuff like that. Ultimately, those people usually live with their employer, the people that make that kind of money. And these prices, that they're able, where they're, some stuff are very almost comparable with the United States, they could sell it at almost American prices, almost U.S. prices, for stuff that they bought for 10 times cheaper on the other side. It's a very quick, easy, big amount of money that they just made. Or for oil, that's one of the biggest ones, and that's why they did. It's one of the reasons they had to shut down the border. Venezuela had to shut down the border with Colombia, is because the oil on that the Venezuelans sell used to. Now they've actually rose the prices, but at one point they were selling oil for something like 15. It wasn't even 25 cents a gallon. I think it was like down to like something ridiculously low. Maybe it was only 25 cents a gallon. Still, in Colombia, gas is $4 a gallon. So over there, that means that the prices are 16 times higher. So you can sell it, buy it at 25 cents a gallon over there, and then come back to the other side and sell it at $3.50. People are still going to buy it because you're still selling it 50 cents cheaper than at the legal gas station. And now you just sold the stuff for 14 times higher on the other side. And now let's just do a little bit of math right here. We'll just say that you buy 10,000 gallons over, let's see, 10,000 gallons. Let's say maybe you do 10 trips. You can probably load a lot into a big truck, I'm guessing, and 10,000 gallons. We'll just say that you're able to purchase that over, say you do it all quickly, you do it in a month's time or whatever. You find a way to transport that much across, and so a 25 cents, and that would be $2,500 that you spent. And then you could sell it at $350, that 10,000. So you sell it at $35,000 for stuff, and then you just subtract that $2,500. You made $32,250. I best added that, didn't I? Let's see. $32,500. And so you just made all that profit with not that much effort. Of course, people are going to take advantage of, ultimately looting the resources. Which if Colombians doing that, they have to go to some pretty pretty hard measure sometimes to counter some of the plans or some of the opportunistic things that some people are doing with Venezuela. And people keep saying, "Oh, the system is about to collapse. The economy is about to collapse." No. Look, Colombia, that's an economy that might crash. I know we'll talk about that, but it's a strong United States ally. Colombia's economy in dire straits right now with inflation. It was about 1,800. It was going 1,800 pesos to a dollar back in 2011. Now it's in 2016. It's 33,040 pesos to a dollar. And another thing, let's go in Colombia, is that they had the horrible political repression that's going on. We have community leaders getting killed. This is ultimately a sign of the crackdown that's happening over Colombia. And I think that it's because they are trying to do drastic measures to keep onto the power deal, at least in Colombia, because they might be facing a 98 scenario there as well, where somebody could come up and take power and bring the revolution over to Colombia as well. I think that people are talking about that the revolution in South America is dying off. I think that what could be happening is it could be starting up again. This could be the start of an even bigger thing. And the next thing that could happen is UNITOR comes into reality more and is no longer this concept and actually becomes more of a functioning body, and officially Banco de Sur actually starts operating and provides the whole South America an option against the IMF, the World Bank, the big bankers, and then ultimately South America becomes a continent free of the Rothschilds and free of the big bankers. That's the ultimate goal right there. And I think that ultimately the next person that's in charge of Venezuela, that's their major goal. Because I don't think what's going to happen under Maduro. I don't think Maduro is going to stay too much longer because he's not really that popular with the people right now. He wasn't really the best pick to become the candidate to run in 2013 after Chavez's death to run against Capriles. But because Capriles is this horrible fascist, they decided that they'll go with Maduro, even though that he wasn't really fit to become president. He's from a blue-collar background. He used to be a bus driver at one point. And now, he's also, he's just doesn't have the same charisma or whatever. I think they need to pick somebody. There's a few candidates that they have, and I think that as we go along, that's the thing that the great thing the Bolivarian Revolution did, is that it made quite a bit of leaders. And I think that with as many leaders, one of them will come up that can actually help out Venezuela. Anyway, you want to call in 718-717-8296, 718-717-8296. We're at Voice of Rebellion Radio, UCY Radio. Everybody, let's get this party started. I was a little bit dragging on the conversation. I was like, managed to try to amp it up a little bit. I wish I had a little bit of music. I mean, play some sound clips, get some good, they have some pretty good revolutionary South American, revolutionary Venezuelan music or whatever. Start playing that stuff. Start playing what they played at the Chavez rally back in 2012. By the way, everybody, this is the alternative media that this is kind of alternative media I'm doing today. I think that this is important for people to not be afraid to criticize what appears to be taints in the truth movement of other people that are bringing this info into it. They may not call it the person specifically or whatever, and depending on the person. It's like Alex Jones, call them out specifically. But I'm saying, to call out these ideas, this info that's literally a lot of times coming straight from the mainstream media into the alternative media, and now it's been pushed to the people in the alternative media to accept the mainstream media propaganda. And this is what we're seeing a lot of. What we're seeing against Chavez, propaganda coming about in many sides. But, there's alternative media that also tell the truth about Chavez. And, I credit RT. They talked pretty well about Chavez over the years, and they gave him a fair analysis after he died. And I after his and after all these trials against the Bolivarian government, and I think people also exaggerate the size of the Venezuelan government. They make it seem like it's a giant encompassing entity, and that it's ran by a few bureaucrats and shady rooms in the background, while the entire country is being ran. Every last big store in Venezuela is ran by the Venezuelan government. But I think people realize that the people have a lot of the power right there, and the people have the control a lot of the decisions that the Venezuelan government will do. And they even sit down with Venezuelan government officials and negotiate for the economic policies that will directly affect them, and actually get to join those meetings. I mean, the United States, that surely doesn't happen, and very few countries I'm sure that there's very few countries that actually could say the same that happened. And it doesn't happen. Israel doesn't happen in the United States. So I think that's what we see with Venezuela is definitely they're definitely being and it's an inclusive government. There's a lot. I think there's more transparency definitely than the United States, and there's the propaganda, the who's pushing the propaganda against Chavez coming from Capulus Radonsky, his side, and the United States mainstream media. These people, those were the ones that actually advocated for the tyranny in the big state of the Andres Perez, where they could just pop who they want in the street, kill them, and then later the people would just be fine with it, or at least that's what they saw. It didn't go that way. It didn't go the way they wanted it to go, and how they thought it should or would go. Ultimately, the people got very upset and were surrounded around Chavez in the 90s. And then by 98, Chavez would win, and then throughout the 2000s, it would change the course of Venezuelan history. Now we're 18 years on, and people outside of Venezuela don't seem to understand South American situation very well. And they don't understand that for many years there was these fascist dictators all in charge of every last government inside of South America. It seemed like, you had in Brazil a fascist dictatorship, in Bolivia there was a fascist dictatorship, there's a fascist dictatorship in Argentina, there's a fascist dictatorship in Venezuela, there was another one in Ecuador, there was another one in Chile, of course, and another place in Latin America. You had in Nicaragua before the Sandinistas. You had in now you have in Honduras, there's a fascist dictatorship that the United States put in place in 2009. And it's not talked about too much nowadays, even though it's such a recent event, the 2009 coup, that people think that these coups, some people that know about the coups that happened in the 70s in Latin America due to the United States influence, they think that was the 70s and it doesn't happen anymore. It just happened in 2009. And they attempted to do it in 2015 in Venezuela. And I believe that they're trying attempts on the Bolivian government by bringing up these scandals or whatever of what they did in their personal lives. That the Bolivian, apparently the Bolivian president Evo Morales, who was the first native president, that's actually would make up the majority of Bolivia. It's 55% of Bolivia is native. And for all this time before, they had these, a lot of times you had a white guy, which only represents 12% of the population, making all the decisions for a 55% native majority population. And they were treated badly. Ultimately, it was a type of apartheid government, pretty much, that was going on. And kind of similar to the South African scenario or the Israeli scenario. And now you have actually one that represents the native people, but they're going to say, oh, the guy had this is the big scale they're trying to bring up. And they're not going to fall for it, the Bolivians. Is that they say, oh, Evo Morales had a girlfriend, and he used state security to protect her. Or no, that's a different story. But that, he kept secret, whatever. Like, he has to close all his last, personal life details to the people. There's transparency of the action. There's a difference between transparency of the actions of what the government does and complete lack of privacy for the people involved that are actually at the highest positions. Do they really need to reveal every, it's different also. I mean, as again, it comes down to a case by case scenario. What personal life details should be brought about? Yes, probably criminal records and maybe financial records and stuff like that. But personal life details, like what effect does him having a girlfriend have anything to do with his performance at the presidency of Bolivia? He did a great job in nationalizing the oil like they did in Venezuela. Bolivia did as well. And it gave many of those Bolivians that were disenfranchised for a long time, it gave them jobs that they never have had before, and it gave them revenue to be put towards social programs that actually help them out like I'd never been helped out before. He did a great job, and ultimately, he also pushed away the United States from their influence that they used to have in Bolivia. And another thing that Evo Morales did is that he early in the presidency, like Chavez did with the coup, he had a test there. Evo Morales had a test, which was the 08, very much they stirred up constructed violence against his supporters throughout Bolivia. But in the long run, I think it was the El Medina, is what it was called, failed in 08. And then business went as usual, and Morales became more popular than ever. Kind of like what happened with Chavez. And after 2002, he became more popular than ever in Venezuela. Morales has became more popular than ever in Bolivia. Now, the referendum, which he
Okay. Hey, here I am. Let me add Chris back. Had tornado sirens going off and power went out on me. Knocked me out. So I'll go get Chris back. All right, what's up here? Come on. All right, here we go. And reconnect over here into chat. So, bam, there it went. Everything blinked and went dark. Sorry about that, Chris. We'll get you back here in a minute, I guess. Well, where? Let me try to add you again. Where you at, Chris? Are you there yet? Okay. I got a message from you. Adding you now there, buddy. There you are, I think.
Okay, we're back online. Sorry about that. We got a little update, a little message from good old Skype telling us what we have to do or something like that, which I guess I'll take care of that after the show. But anyways, I'm trying to figure out where I was talking about. Oh yeah, I was talking about Morales and the legacy, continuing his legacy under the next guy. Yeah, I'm hoping that in 2019, that the Bolivians don't make the same mistake, which I don't think they will, because they've established things a little bit differently than Argentina did before. And I think that one thing is that, I don't think they really had it. There wasn't much of a revolution, how people saw a revolution outside the Kirchners. Maybe it was a little bit of the problem, that they thought the Kirchners had just been around too long. And I don't think it was, and I think people ultimately, they just couldn't see, a leader that wasn't a Kirchner. It was first Nestor Kirchner, who was a close friend of Chavez, and then Christine Kirchner was also a close friend of Chavez, but she came about more later, Chavez's life, and then Chavez died in the middle of her term, and she almost became, very well liked. But the fact that she wouldn't run again made it much harder, for the whole thing to continue, and for the next guy who had to fill these big footsteps that Christina Kirchner had been. Christina Fernandez Kirchner, otherwise known as CFK, which, she had done many things, had been, continued in Nestor Kirchner's footsteps. And one of the biggest things that she did, I think, is that the fact is that she was actually a good, there's all these things to be just puppets that are women leaders or whatever, like Merkel or what Hillary Clinton will be, and what the South Korean leader. Well, she's actually the daughter of a horrible fascist dictatorship, who was ultimately a puppet for a bigger entity. But she was actually an independent leader that was actually pretty good and she continued what her husband was doing before his death. And I remember that also, it wasn't just Hugo Chavez who died from cancer in South America. Nestor Kirchner pretty much died from cancer. He ultimately died of a heart attack. It was probably attributed to the cancer he was fighting before. Nestor Kirchner died at a pretty early death. He was only, I think, 64 when he died. Or no, he was only like 60. I think he was 60 exactly, I think. Yeah. Chavez was 58. And I think that along with the other, like 8 other leaders in South America that had contracted, I think 7 other leaders in South America that had contracted cancer, it definitely looks a little bit odd from the outside. Like saying is that there was some kind of plot, and I'm not going out on a limb here, the technology certainly exists. And I think that I know that there was definitely a huge motive for them to do it, because like Gaddafi was doing in Africa, and was eventually going to try to put a currency that in a bank that would be, a whole, would make a whole country, a whole continent, one country, the African Union, that would be all united, opposed to the imperialism and the neocolonialism, and ultimately in the Rothschilds' control that they've had over African countries for many years, that he was about to end that. But because he was about to do a continent-wide revolution on the world's most powerful continent, they killed him. And they were trying that in South America as well, and maybe that's why they did these. Might have had a motive to do these plots. And they're still, working on the Unisur Banco do Sul project, which is one of the most important projects in South America's the last 15 years, but nobody's talking about it. Even though that it was successfully completed, just not put into functional operation really yet. They tried that in Africa. It didn't exactly, or Gaddafi was trying that in Africa, and he got killed for it. So all the other things that he had done. I mean, Gaddafi had, that was the thing, is that he could have done that. He was the man that could have done the impossible. I mean, he brought water to places it never had been brought before. They were talking about his giant freshwater water program that he did. It was like the world's largest project of that kind. He reduced poverty in one of Africa's poorest countries, all the way to the point where Africa's highest standard of living was Libya. He had made it so affordable for anyone to get oil, food, what else? Health care, education. And Gaddafi kicked out the Rothschilds and freed his currency from them, and continued on and avoided one United States attempt on the country. And actually, where Libya was able to withhold that attempted overthrow of Gaddafi in '86, and then in 2011, ultimately, the United States came back with a vengeance and brought 10 times the forces. It was NATO, and then they, did a NATO bombing and supported these terrorists that they called activists or whatever, and then they ultimately, murdered Gaddafi brutally. The labels that they put on these, that's the United States government for you, is that they'll call terrorists rebels, and they'll call rebels terrorists, like they've done with the Free Syrian Army, calling them rebels when they're terrorists, and the Hezbollah, they've called them terrorists when they're the rebels. I mean, they're the resistance to Zionism in the Middle East, and they're the resistance to these terrible Gulf states that repress their people, repress women, not even allow women to drive in Saudi Arabia. They behead people, they stone people for minor offenses. These absolutely human rights violating governments in the Middle East, in the Gulf states. And the thing that they all have in common is that the United States and the West supports them. Saudi Arabia is heavily supported by Britain, the United States, and Israel, and are supported by Canada. Even after they have Trudeau, who is now taking power in Canada, and like I predicted, Trudeau would become another puppet, and he's now trying to stand against Putin or whatever. He looks absolutely ridiculous, and he's also continuing to send money to Saudi Arabian head shoppers. Trudeau he's a fool. He's a 40-something-year-old, really, looks kind of just ultimately frail, and he's more of a nerd than anything. I mean, if you want to go by his personality. It's funny, all these women that were drooling about him right after the election, or, saying that Trudeau was, such good looking or whatever, and that, was such a handsome president or whatever. And even if that was the case, he's still a puppet and a horrible person and a murderer for continuing Canada's military operations, using Canada's military to assist the United States in their imperialist ambitions. And all Canada is, what is Canada? They're America Junior. They're just America's lackey, and they don't. I think Canadians wouldn't want to admit it, a lot of Canadian people are living a bit of cognitive dissonance, that they believe that they're actually, that either A, that America's friendship with Canada is good, or B, they believe that Canada is actually different than the United States or whatever, but they're ultimately just the same. North America, like Mexico's the same way with Peña Nieto at the moment. At least their people right now are trying to overthrow Peña Nieto, and he doesn't look like he's going to make it to this 2018 election. And because he did the horrible thing of Ayotzinapa, he disappeared those people and killed them. And we had that show back in October talking about how horrible Ayotzinapa was, the whole cover-up that's happened, and that's been over a year since it's happened. And the Mexican government gets parodied in movies and stuff for being so corrupt, and they get parodied for that's their bullshitness that exists there. The Canadian government, they operate in a bit different way. I mean, they are like, I guess the kinder face to imperialism is what may some people see them. Obama, introduced the United States now. He's now became synonymous with drones and synonymous with wars they started. He started 7 wars across the Middle East, and all these countries are being invaded. All these countries are being, or these invading armies are being supported by the United States. Like what's happened with Saudi Arabia invading Yemen, that the United States supports Saudi Arabia murdering tons of innocent Yemeni children and Yemeni people, and also they also are murdering the people that the Yemeni people wanted to empower, the Houthis. And the Yemeni destruction by Saudi Arabia is being supported by them, and at the same time, the Israeli, operations in Gaza are being supported by the United States. And the United States doesn't have really an option. I mean, a lot of these politicians that Israel has in their pocketbooks. But it just goes without saying is that I don't see how anybody could really take, around the world, could still take the United States seriously as a promoter of peace and democracy or whatever when they bomb countries and then put in fascist dictatorships. During that coup, after it was a very violent ordeal in the coup in 73 to take out Salvador Allende and put in Pinochet, and then afterwards Pinochet murdered like 60,000 people. Oh, no big deal, right? He was, he put people in the back of vans and took them out to the countryside, and they disappeared them. They just got disappeared. Nobody really knows what happened to them. It wasn't even like that was the creepiness of all of it. Wouldn't be? I mean, just imagine, just one night at 3 a.m, armed men with guns, an armor with guns, come to your door, throw you in a van and take you out to the wilderness, and who knows what happens. I mean, I guess maybe they just leave you there, make you fend for yourself. I don't think that was the case, though. I think they just got you, they murdered you and left you there. That's probably what happened. And then your family can find you 20 years later or whatever. That's what happened with the Chile incident situation. They're just finding them now. Victims from the 80s and the 70s even, I guess. Now it's been actually almost 43 years since the coup happened, and there's still ugly traces of Pinochet still left in Chile, including some of the people that still support the murderous policies of Pinochet, I guess, by still supporting. I mean, I don't know if they think if they know that's how it was then, but why these people will still support Pinochet to this day. But Pinochet was one of the most brutal dictators in South American history, and it's definitely one of the ugliest signs of what the United States government did to South America all those years, throughout the 50s, throughout the 60s, throughout the 70s, throughout the 80s, all the way through the 90s. They also, they killed, Jacobo Arbenz, who was, going to be a progressive change for Guatemala, and then ultimately later they put in a fascist dictatorship in Guatemala as well. And then they ended those people. They took away the guns from the Guatemalan people, and then they killed 200,000 natives. And that's another thing is that people forget about the repression that's happened against a particular group in South America for many years under the people that are now trying to take back power, the people that call themselves champions of liberty and democracy or whatever. These people were the ones that used to be the dictators killing native South Americans and stuff in Bolivia, in Guatemala and Peru and in Brazil, it's ultimately that's what happens under these guys, and it will happen again. Some of these people are the same people that are never were really put to justice for what they did, and then they come back to bite these countries in the ass. Chavez, he doesn't just have a legacy in South America; he has a legacy in the Middle East too. I mean, for his his support for Palestine and his ultimately strong rhetoric that he had on against Israel. Palestine was Palestine really, he's really admired there. He's one of the most admired leaders that's not from the Middle East inside of Palestine. The Gazan struggle really was really represented by the Venezuelan government, and Chavez really brought that to the light of the Venezuelans, the South Americans. And before it had been hidden, they didn't talk about that. They didn't talk about another example of what ultimately Israel is a colonialist project from European Jews that came there that had no claim to the Palestinian land. It was all Palestine at one point, and then they came in, they took a bunch of the land, saying that we've been pushed out of Europe or whatever, so we're coming back to the homeland that our God, that the people that actually created Israel didn't actually believe in, that God promised us. And then they were let in, and then later they just started seizing lands. And then when they try to defend themselves, they take even more lands. And now we see there's just little specks of the West Bank left in Gaza. They've been all put into these heavy population centers. Palestine, the West Bank, it's just these little specks that keep more and more settlements keep popping up. So there's just going to be eventually to a point where there's going to be no West Bank left, and they're walled in anyways. In Gaza, it's just a small little strip of land, and Gaza City has 1.8 million people. And then when they get bombed, so many people die because they could just drop a bomb on one building and 50 people die. It's so heavily populated. They have 2,000 people were killed during the 2014 bombings of Palestine. 8,000 people were injured, and 80,000 were made homeless. And this is a place that only has 2 million people or something like that. Or I think it has a few million people. That's it. That's all that's live in Palestine. Chavez stood very strong with his air of solidarity. Even in speeches, he would say "Oh halal," which means we hope or hope so, and he would say all at the same time, "Inshallah," which is the same thing, hope so, in Arabic, and he made strong relations with Iran, and which he was heavily criticized for. I mean, it was funny because he was confronted by Fox News about it. We'll talk about his support from Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, which they brought up funny claims because they said that Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, they said, people are being hanged in the streets or whatever, which is a phony claim. Like this is still 1979 or whatever, during the violence of then that was going on. Yeah, there was a lot of tension, and I think some people were hung that were believed to be counter-revolutionaries or whatever during the Islamic Revolution in 79. But they were saying is that, that he's a Holocaust denier, which I think Ahmadinejad had said many times that he wasn't a Holocaust denier, and it was a phony claim in itself. Maybe at the time I know he had said stuff, but later he kind of retracted on that, and he said that he wasn't a Holocaust denier. He was confronted by Fox News, and then they were like asking, how can you support a person like that? Saying, well, dealing with United States imperialism, you kind of have to work with your friends that are against that. And at the same time, he started to say, it's like, well, who you work for? And it's like, oh, Fox News. And he's like, Fox News? My buddy Sean Penn would say, the stupid people from Fox News. And they started to go on, your mind's all confused, and you really don't know what's going on because you've been brainwashed. Because, those Fox News reporters, these talking news speakers, yeah, it's true. Either they I wonder if they're actually brainwashed themselves. They actually believe the crap they're spewing out, or do they know they're aware that it's complete bullshit, but they just do it for the paycheck? I mean, these people also be, that brainwashed. The people that are actually putting out the information, the brainwash, like at Fox News and CNN and MSNBC. And I think every time we have another show here on the alternative media, you just be glad that you're listening to the alternative media and not listening to Fox or CNN or MSNBC and watch another boring news head talk. I mean, you can see it's just complete garbage. It's devolved into putting complete globalist propaganda coming straight from the Council of Foreign Relations. The Council of Foreign Relations is, for people that don't really know, is a elite ran think tank that pretty much decides is a big part of America's foreign policy and how they're going to do stuff. And Hillary Clinton even said she was glad that the Council of Foreign Relations was right down the street from where she worked, because she didn't really have to think and she could just take orders from those guys. That Hillary is just, I think that's what ultimately will set her as the president. She's the ultimate establishment puppet, and she's 100% behind Israel. We all know that. And she will bomb Iran. She said, I think the AIPAC like 10 years ago, that no matter what, she'll find a way to bomb Iran. Which I think that any person that's willing to, that's treason. It's sending our young men to go die in Iran, ultimately for the Rothschilds' interest. And that's another thing that really pissed me off, is that all these, here's another thing. I'm going to tell you right now. If I catch you, and this is to all the people that I know personally, people that go or went to Bogus City High School, and I see you later, coming back 2 years later, and you're recruiting, I hear you, or I see you on Facebook recruiting, especially underage people, 16, 17 years old. And if I see you in person, I got a little surprise for you. It's going to be called my left fist and my right fist, right across your fucking teeth. I don't think I won't. I'll even start an argument just so you punch first, so I can then get the permission to knock the crap out of you, because I'm not going to jail over it. But I will be happy to, and also I'll remind you, I'm a pretty big guy. Now, this is not a threat to violence, but this is just saying, don't do stupid shit. Because I am pissed off. I'm so done with it. All these people, they fall for it. And you're telling people that are economically disenfranchised, they can't find a job. I've been on the job hunt for a while, and a few times really searching for jobs, and there's not a lot of jobs. And then I see this big paycheck, $2,000, $3,000 or whatever, that they can get a month after a certain amount of time, maybe even $4,000 a month after like 3 or 4 years. The people that couldn't even dream to see that money before, as long as they're in the military, they're like, oh yeah, for hell yeah, I'll do that. But you're taking advantage of the economically weak, and ultimately the military, they take advantage of the minorities, and they have this disproportionate amount of minorities in the military, and they recruit heavily the minority poor high schools. Sometimes even recruiting the people that are 14, 15 years old is absolutely sickening. And then I see young people, just the worst kind of recruiters, really, because I don't think a lot of times these guys, these older guys are 40 years old or whatever, 50 years old, they're not going to reach to the young people, the same way that the young people reach to other young people. I see the real problem is those 20-year-old, 21-year-old dudes coming back to high school they went to 2 years ago, or whatever, 2-3 years ago, and then they see some of the same people, that were freshmen maybe when they were the seniors, and now they're seniors or whatever, and now it's up to them to try to recruit those seniors to join the military. It's very easy when they have a personal connection, and when they bring those numbers out, to say, oh yeah, those people will be like, oh yeah, of course I'll do that. That's a lot of money, and you're cool, I'm cool, I'm cool with you, and then I'll join the military. That's what happens. Or they do it on Facebook now. And I don't know if it's being paid to do it, but I see it a few times. People, oh, I'm in the Navy, and I get paid this amount of money, and now I'm stationed. I'm like, yeah, you're stationed there for now. But wait till you get deployed to Syria or Iran or whatever. You won't be talking about how great the military is then, when you're going down a dirt road, worrying about IEDs going off, and at the same time, And then you might still think it's okay to that point, and then you have to go into some really dangerous city or whatever, and but you don't realize that you're not fighting for freedom, you're fighting for the banker's interest. But then you'll really realize it when it is very, hopefully not, but it could happen to you. You get blown up in an IED explosion, your leg gets blown clean off, and then you come back to the United States after you had your medical discharge or whatever. The VA, you have to wait 5 years to get anything done. Just ask all those Vietnam vets, the few that are still alive. Just ask. I have one of them on my Facebook. How the VA is with the veterans. It's not very good health care, and it's not because it's free health care. It's because the United States, our government runs it, and they're so cheap, and they don't give a shit about veterans. It's our government is one of the worst with veteran care and how we treat veterans afterwards. We have so many homeless veterans in this country. It's just a complete throwaway because they really just see them as pawns. That's how Henry Kissinger even says that military men are dumb animals to be used as pawns in foreign policy. That's how they see them. In Russia, veterans are treated with respect, honor, all that, because they're not seen as pawns. They're not seen like that by the government of Russia. In Russia, they only, for one thing, they don't send the military out after every situation. And when they do send the military, it's quick. You saw how they were able to handle a pretty major thing, with the Georgian government threatening Russia or threatening and they were repeating on the self-determination of those two regions, South Ossetia and Abkhazia. The Russian military came in there, cleaned the house. It was over like in 5 days. That was it. And people say, "Oh, but this Ukraine thing's went on for a year or two." No, they haven't even entered Ukraine. They're still in Crimea because Crimea voted to become part of Russia. So now it's part of Russia. Ukraine, they've put up these phony images so many times of, oh look, here's another satellite image of Russian troops entering Ukraine, but it looks like it's a image taken from above of toy trucks or whatever going across grass. That's what it looks like. It's so fake, these images that they put up. Ultimately, Russia has not entered Ukraine at all. They've entered Crimea, and Crimea is not Ukraine. And it's like what Putin has said before, Crimea River. If you're mad about that. Yeah, he hasn't said that, but that would be funny. He's too diplomatic almost. He doesn't say, what, he doesn't really go to like funny insults or whatever, like what Chavez would do. He kind of just, he'll say stuff like more like, very long and with very big words, intellectual, speak. He'll say what he wants to say. He completely demolished the whole New World Order concept in a 07 speech, but it was in such a long, drawn out. It was big, it was these, was the vernacular he used, was very high level, intellectual, very intellectual vocabulary that ultimately I think a lot of people didn't really see what he was saying in that speech. But it was to a room of foreign dignitaries saying that it's I'm pretty sure I come from dignity, which a lot of these puppets don't have any dignity, so I feel weird calling them dignitaries. Like Merkel or whatever. Merkel was in that room, and you could see her face, starting to get more angrier as the speech went on. I'm probably sure Hollande was there. Or not Hollande, Sarkozy was the president of France at the time. Hollande's now the president. He's really unpopular right now. Merkel and Hollande are just horrible. They're starting to get really unpopular. Merkel's really unpopular right now, so it's very interesting what's going to happen down the road, over this whole migrants scandal and the whole EU is just collapsing. All these currencies that are connected to the United States are really suffering right now. You have the Canadian dollar, so you have the Canadian, or not the Canadian, the euro, you have the Mexican peso, you have the Colombian peso, you have the Turkish economy, the Ukrainian economy. Am I missing a major one here? The Spanish economy. They all are, all these allies in the United States, their economies are doing pretty rough. But you have Russia, that's bouncing back. You have Iran that's doing fine. in Venezuela, the economy's struggling right now in Venezuela. It's definitely going to stop struggling soon. I think it's good, because right now Saudi Arabia is going to have to raise the prices of gas, and it's very likely that the prices of gas will just rise naturally from the influx that happens when summer happens. People drive a lot more in summer. People go on road trips and stuff in the United States and just all around the world. I think in Europe, in other countries, they do the same thing. So, price of gas will go up, cause a chain reaction. It might go up, back up to even like around $3 a gallon here in the United States. And barrel wise, I think it's at 27. Was at 27 a barrel at one point. I think it'll go up to maybe around 50 cents a barrel, which that's definitely sustainable for Venezuela because that's what they always sold at $50 a barrel. That's when their economy is thriving. I'm not saying Saudi Arabia's economy can't really thrive at selling $50 a barrel, unlike Venezuela's economy that was able to thrive at $50 a barrel. Because ultimately, people neglect one major fact: Saudi's oil reserves are less than Venezuela. So ultimately, Saudi Arabia thinks that they can play this game because they believe that the Venezuelan economy was that fragile or whatever. But in the long run, Venezuela, if it goes down to the end and who actually is out of oil first, Saudi Arabia will be out of oil first, and they'll go bankrupt first before Venezuela goes bankrupt. If Venezuela can keep going, and Venezuela has a pretty big amount of money that they've made over the years. I think they saved up for a rainy day. And they're ready for something like this. And it's been over a year that this gas war has happened, and it's a perfect strategy. I mean, it's this is how business is always run, and at this point, it's at the gas market. When you want to run your competitor out of business, you just sell way under what they can afford, and you keep selling, until the point where they run out. But this won't work because Venezuela has more oil. Venezuela also, they people talk all the smack about. They say that all these people are waiting long food lines, whatever. Here comes the bread lines. All they're waiting for toilet paper. What else? I mean, it's just like these bug sentences that exist online or whatever on the Reddit community, and Reddit is Hasbro central, man. I mean, it's just like people immediately they see anything article to Israel or whatever, and it just like you get 30 down votes. I mean, I have a friend here on UCY radio tells me about all his experiences on Reddit or whatever, and it's a complete joke. The website, I thought that Reddit actually had like intellectual conversations going on, but it's pretty much where they make it seem like they're about to have an intellectual conversation, and then they put a bunch of stupid stuff and then downvote anybody that actually has a real critical thought to say about like against the Zionists or whatever. The Reddit, that sounds like a bunch of stuff they would start saying. Oh, here comes the bread line. Oh, here comes they don't have toilet paper. Oh, look, East Germany. Oh, look, it's they went the wait line for a sandwich. No, certain products, yeah, they're not getting anymore, and even like brands that they used to get, like for example, for flour, which is actually a major thing in South America to buy. Like everybody buys flour. Pan, apparently they have like shortages of that specific flour, or some potatoes or whatever that people actually complain. This is right there, and the more you look at some of these complaints, don't they sound like just complete first world problems? There was people who were complaining that they couldn't get potatoes, French fries at the Wendy's. That's they were selling yuca fries at the Wendy's down in Venezuela. Which yes, that's actually apparently one business they've allowed to keep. I think they've kept a couple almost like novelties almost. And apparently, I didn't. I was a little bit surprised myself to find out that they actually have Wendy's down in Venezuela. I also got McDonald's, so, and a lot of them. In Colombia, they got practically everything. They got KFC. They got Subway. Yeah, Subway is just absolutely disgusting now after all that scandal. They let that weirdo be their spokesperson for all that time. They got who else did they get? they got Burger King, they don't got Wendy's though. They got a few more of those fast food places. I mean, they got there's a major one. I can't. Like pizza. They have pizza. You know, they've allowed a lot of these big corporate fast food chains or whatever. Unfortunately, into Colombia, it doesn't help their economy one bit. You know, because they don't hire that many people, and they really they run a lot of people out of business. They're really mimicking down there in Colombia. That's what I saw last time I went. You know, they even have their own like Walmart, you know, that they made, and they have these major chains. Even though it might not be ones you find in America, but still, it's ran the same kind of way as the United States goes, with a corporatist feel to it. And going back to that, yeah, Subway. Yeah, if you actually think Subway subs are gonna make you lean or whatever, you think again. I mean, the thing about that is like people think you eat a bunch of Subway or whatever and you lose weight. That's not how it works. Is that they figured? I guess that the food's so nasty that you'll just eat a little bit because you're gonna, you know, these flavorless sandwiches that, you know, are supposedly healthy for you. You know, it's just that it doesn't taste good, so you don't eat it like the same as if you were at a Wendy's or whatever, and you get 3 cheeseburgers or something like that. And then, I mean, I don't know how long. I mean, I think that's a big scandal or whatever that's a big scandal of the Subway. You know, the Subway thing is, yeah, that creep that was Gerald Fogel or whatever that was working for them for that time. Whether Subway knew he was molesting kids during the time that he had while he's working with them. I mean, maybe they didn't know all that time. Still, that was just a horrible story, and not very surprising considering that, you know, I mean, the guy always seemed a little bit off, didn't he? I mean, maybe it was too quick to judge the character, but he seemed a little bit. He just seemed creepy. I don't know what was I'll describe it, being off. You know, just. And I think that ultimately, I think in the long run, hopefully gets the unfortunately low the maximum sentence of like 11 years. I think you only can get like 9 years or something like that. I don't know, which, you know, it's like that there's people that are, you know, that sold weed in the United States, and they get what? Some people get life sentences or whatever. There was that guy that sold a few pounds of weed in South Carolina, I saw, and he was doing. I think I don't know if he had been officially exonerated, but he's doing what last time I checked, life. And well, there's people that even get away with murder in this country. You know, it seems to be all mostly a matter about the money you have. You know, because you see the millionaires and these billionaires, like they go to court every now and then, they get a crime. They spend like 4 months in jail for some major crime. It's really upsetting. You know, they'll murder somebody, they'll run somebody over with their car, and then they'll get like 2 months. You know, while people that are just selling weed to survive and stuff like that, they get 10 years. You know, not even selling that big of amounts, especially in a state where they, you know, have the supposed no tolerance policy. Well, you know, they have pill mills in their state, or they have ultimately, you have the politicians working with major drug traffickers. That's another bullshit argument that they bring up against Chavez quite a bit, is that they try to. I mean, I see these right wing, especially from like these right wing blogs on the internet or whatever. They say they call him saying that he's a he was a big narco trafficker president or whatever. I've seen like T-shirts that say "narco" with Chavez's face on it, which is bullshit arguments, and they got everything flipped. You know, this also goes back to the lame argument that. And it's another buzzword argument. I mean, you know, how many times has it been said? They're trying to say that Chavez worked with FARC rebels in Colombia. You know, in South America, we've heard that bullshit so many times. But the truth is that Chavez did not work with FARC. In fact, he had arrested a FARC member, and then he had brought him. He brought him to Cucuta and extradite him to Colombia to go to trial. And then the Colombian government had the nerve to say that Chavez wasn't doing enough to stop FARC rebels. When FARC rebels don't even operate in his country, the Colombian government can't get a grip on the FARC problem, and I think FARC, everything from this conflict that's went on for 52 years or something like that at this point. Yeah, it's been going on since 1964. That haven't been able to stop it all this time. I think almost they're codependent on each other, FARC and the Colombian government. FARC is the reason why the Colombian government's able to put down military checkpoints all down the highway. They're the reason why why the Colombian government is able to abuse its people and kill community leaders and stuff like that, because there's always FARC. They say, oh, FARC's always worse. Or they could say that we have to protect you guys from FARC. And FARC, there's only a few members of it anyways. This is a tiny group. It's like down to 8,000 people or whatever, may up into around 20,000. And they haven't done really any major thing besides a lot of attacks and stuff like that on people. They don't even really attack Colombian government officials, or they haven't done anything. Actually FARC was never behind actually it seems like attacks on Colombian government too much. I think that was more of the other groups. There were legitimate guerrilla groups in Colombia, like I think the M19 were, but FARC themselves was just they've always been just a drug trafficking gang inside of Colombia, and that's how Chavez saw them. That's why Chavez didn't support them and actually arrested the FARC members that were trying to run over to Venezuela. Yeah, ultimately the drug traffickers are Colombian government, the Colombian paramilitaries that work with the Colombian government, the Mexican government, all these right-wing governments in the past, and the Contra rebels, which the Contras were just the deposed, they were the deposed people from the dictatorship from the 70s and the 60s and before that the Sandinistas had deposed. The Contra rebels, much like the Venezuelan opposition today, they're pretending like they're this new thing, this new fresh thing, and that they're not like the dictators. That they completely ignore. Both of them completely ignore the previous crimes under the Andres Perez dictatorship in Venezuela and the I think it was Simone or whatever his name was in Nicaragua. Well, the truth is that they are just a lot of times even the same people trying to retake power. Capriles Radonsky in Venezuela he's almost too young really to have been involved in Venezuelan politics prior to Chavez, but he wasn't actually involved directly. But the people the people in the opposition, a lot of them were, a lot of the top leaders, and I think Alup, he was a hardcore supporter of the Venezuelan government under Andres Perez, and now he is, now he's like 70 years old, and he's trying to. I don't think he's going to try to actually take power himself. He's now the leader of the MUD opposition, which is the fascists. I'll just call them that. They're just all out fascists. These people that are, trying to retake power in Venezuela. They want to give power to the corporate elite again, and they have no interest in helping the poor of Venezuela in the future. And there's, abstract poverty is almost non-existent now. But believe me, it would come back under the next dictatorship if these opposition, actually are able to complete their goals. But now, like I said, there's been so many plots that have been done against the Venezuelan government, the Bolivarian government, and the Venezuelan people have been able to thwart a lot of these plots against, the coup. Part of the reason the coup failed in 2002 is because he had 1 million supporters of Chavez were waiting at the streets of Caracas, and they would storm the palace themselves if those Pedro Carmona had stayed. They all fled. That's what ultimately happened. And then was the vacancy. Chavez was called back, and he showed up he showed in his helicopter like a rock star as he descended down into the waiting crowd, and I think he gave a speech 3 in the morning. It was one of the iconic moments of South American history as a whole. I think today was a very major moment in Venezuelan history as well, as these, this is what always happens, is that they bring 10,000 of their guys, the Chavistas bring 1 million. The opposition brought, a few hundred a day? The Chavistas bring 10,000. Next time, a third coup attempt? That they might bring 100,000 this time. The Chavistas will show up in 10 million, and all the militias will show up. they can always outnumber because the Chavistas will always win in the streets, and the elections may not. The elections. Like what happened at this time was the National Assembly. Anyways, they cheated. That's why. Is that it would they might have won the overall vote, but they definitely didn't win the supermajorities that they now have the power of. They have the supermajority because they took 3 seats that were illegal. They had no legal right to run, and they did it anyways. And then they just continued their way into the National Assembly. But I guess the Venezuelan police are too afraid to arrest them because of the uproar that would cause. That would probably result in some major thing happening from from Colombia or Panama or one of their neighbors, which Colombia and Panama are still heavily influenced by the United States. Brazil's not. That's one neighbor that's not. Bolivia and Peru. Peru is actually prosperous because they got election coming up in the next it's next month. It's 4 weeks from now. Actually, I remember it's April 10th. April 10th they have the election, and it'll be it'll probably. I mean, a lot of people are really angry that this one lady Fujimori is running, which she was connected to some really bad stuff in the 90s, but government-wise. So this will be interesting. Well, we're down to the last 5 minutes, really. I mean, about 5 minutes until the bumper hits. So anybody wants to give a last minute, call in 718-717-8296, 718-717-8296. I've noticed that I don't think I've had a caller since maybe before the I think was the last time I had a caller. Might have been the 14th or something like that last month, and now we're all the way here on March 13th, and we still haven't had a caller since. I mean, I don't think we didn't have a caller the 28th. We didn't have a caller last week. We haven't had a caller since so far today. By the way, I wanted to give a little update on one of our friends here at Voice of Rebellion Radio, Rosalind Fuller, who was a guest twice with me. One time here, on UCY. Both were on Stable Radio, and one time I was already working at a UCY radio here, but the problem was that she is 5 hours ahead over there in Ireland, and the show starts at 2 a.m. her time. So I decided to have her on at like 2 p.m. on Saturday on Stable Radio, so you can check out that interview. You can check out the interview that I did way back in March on a regular Voice of Rebellion program back on March 1st, 2015. We interviewed her for almost 3 hours. I had her on, and it was like at 8 p.m. too. That was the weird thing. So she actually stayed up really late for that show. I mean, that show started at 1, and she stayed up like 4 in the morning with us, and she lost in her chance to try to get the Irish. She was going to try to go for the Irish Parliament, and she's now I think she's looking to go on Sputnik and Telesur more. She used to do art. She did recently an article at RT. She used to do she was more a regular writer at RT, doing op-ed articles. Which op-ed on RT, sometimes we can find the stuff that even the rest of RT doesn't even talk about. Like that's where you just they'll start talking about depopulation, New World Order. In RT, they really put stuff that no major news sources talk about, and it's really entertaining news to watch. I mean, it's really refreshing compared to the mainstream news that we have here in the United States, and I can watch RT for hours. And also talk about that, Russia, they actually, I think they're gonna put I think they were gonna put like a little plaque or something honoring Chavez, where they had they were going to do something with that. They have a street actually in Moscow named after Hugo Chavez Street. Russia really has shown their solidarity with Venezuela over the last few years, and Venezuela and Russia have a good alliance, and had a good alliance with Chavez and Putin, and now with Chavez, or not Chavez, Maduro and Putin, they have shown to work together pretty well. I think that will continue. Hopefully, the legacy of Chavez was the listeners. People realize what he did for South America and what the spirit of his revolution means for South America, and how people throughout South America really what they're afraid of what could happen if it's forgotten about, and if we forget what it was like before. If it goes back to the time of the 70s and the 80s, where 1 million plus leftists were killed throughout South America, and the big bankers and the elites and the Rothschilds and these Exxon and BP and these other giant oil companies and these giant corporations, they had the control of Venezuela, they had the control of South America. They still have the control of Colombia to this day, but maybe that'll be changing soon. Hopefully it changes soon. We can only hope. As Chavez would say, ojalá, inshallah. 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 So, I think it's like Allah be willing or something like that is like direct translation. Say hope so or I hope so in English or in Arabic. We're wrapping up our show. We're in the last 3 minutes or whatever. Next week, the 20th, we don't really have a set topic yet, but there might be a big change coming for the Voice of Rebellion team coming up soon. And so stick around for that. Definitely listen next week and the week after that. And there might be a major guest coming up on the 27th. We'll see what happens. Definitely we got a couple of good shows planned for the rest of March. And it's been great doing this tribute to Chavez, and it's one of my political heroes. And I'm going to get a lot of flack for probably this last 2 shows. And I did at least 2 shows in 2015. I think I did one on like March 8th, 2015, and I did another one in Spanish. And then I know I did 2-part tribute back in 2014, and that probably will change for next year. And I probably will still talk about Venezuela throughout the rest of the year. But definitely it was great to honor. Every time I get to honor Chavez, definitely it humbles me a little bit looking at the great legacy that he had and the amazing life he had. And so I think that his personality, his charisma, his energy, that he showed at his rallies, dancing, and really being one with the public and just being like another regular Joe at sometimes, and or regular Jose, I guess would be down in Venezuela. Him singing to his crowd definitely was great. It's a spirit of revolution. That was Chavez. But Chavez is not dead, really. His physical body may be dead, but the mental, or what lives in the mental capacities of the Venezuelans, what lives in the spiritual energy of the Venezuelans, Chavez, he's still around. He was in every Venezuelan, all the supporters, and the poor of Venezuela. He's still with us. Hopefully, some people in other parts of the world will realize what Chavez meant to those people and what he meant to South America, that he'll stop being ridiculed.
Point and no return, and nobody can stop it. Malcolm Little, when he knelt before Elijah Muhammad, the comet that killed the dinosaurs, changing the earth. They love to criticize, they always say I changed for the worse. Like prescription pills when you misusing them, nigga. The Templar Knights when they took Jerusalem, nigga, and figured out what was buried under Solomon's temple, Al-Aqsa. The name is not coincidental. I know too much, the government is trying to murder me. No coming back like cutting your wrists open vertically. How could the serpent be purposely put in charge of the country? Genetic engineered sickness spread amongst me. My people are so hungry that they attack without reason, like a fucking dog ripping off the hand that feeds him. Immortal technique is treason to the Patriot Act. So come and get me, motherfucker, cause I'm not coming back. This is the point from which I can never return.